Writer's Read by LiTracey, getting that book in children's hands.
Hi, I'm Tracey Grice and welcome to the Writer's Read podcast. I'm a teacher and I'm really passionate about getting kids reading. The inspiration for this podcast came from a quote by American author Nancy Atwell, and she says, "For students of every ability and background, it's the simple, miraculous act of reading a good book that turns them into readers. Because even for the least experienced, most reluctant reader, it's the one good book that changes everything. The job of adults who care about reading is to move heaven and earth to put that book into a child's hands." So this podcast is designed to do just that. It's not only a podcast that can help children and adolescents connect with authors and books, it's also a resource for parents, teachers, and librarians who are helping kids on their reading journey. On this episode of the Writer's Read podcast, I'm chatting with Tristan Bancks, an author who has been involved in all kinds of storytelling, like acting, TV presenting, making short films, and writing for magazines and newspapers. I was lucky enough to see him in action at my school and chat with him about his reading life. And here's a taste of what's to come on this podcast.
I think I was never a worthy reader. I wasn't kind of told that you read in order to better yourself necessarily. I read because I loved stories and I enjoyed being inside those stories.
And later in this episode, you'll find out how to win a copy of Tristan's latest Tom Weekly book. Also, on this episode of the Writer's Read podcast, we hear from our student reviewer Liv. And as always, Rebecca will review some of the other books Tristan has written. Now, let's jump right in and hear from Tristan. But before we do, here's a little bit about him. Aside from being a talented storyteller of page and screen, he's also a writer ambassador for literacy charity Room to Read. His books for kids and teens include the 2015 CBCA honour book, Two Wolves, which also won the Yabba and Koala Children's Choice Awards, as did his thriller, The Fall, also a CBCA notable book. So, Tristan, what are you reading for us today?
I'm reading from my new book, Tom Weekly, My Life and Other Failed Experiments. It's the sixth book in a series of books of short stories, and they're funny, hopefully funny, weird, and sometimes gross short stories about things that happened to me when I was a kid, and then I exaggerate the stories and sort of build on them with my imagination. So here goes. This is the first story in the book, and it's actually one that kids helped me brainstorm in schools as I was travelling around in the year that I was writing the book. Okay, the story's called Hostage. "Give me all your money or the guinea pig gets it." These are the first words I hear when I arrive home from school. I'm standing in my bedroom doorway. My evil sister, Tanya, is holding Gus, my brand new guinea pig, out the window. Gus has long ginger hair. He paws at the air with his tiny claws. "What did you say?" I ask. "I said, give me all your money or I drop your guinea pig onto the concrete." It's at least a 3-metre drop to the path below. I've always known my sister was evil. She once threw a hamburger patty at my head. She used me as a slave for at least 4 years of my childhood. She made me eat Vegemite off her big toe. But to threaten to take the life of the world's cutest guinea pig? This is a new low. So I say the obvious thing. "I don't have any money." "Liar!" she shouts, almost making Gus's black marble eyes pop out of his head. "Put him down," I demand, dropping my school bag to the floor. "If you say so," she says, shrugging. "No!" I rush forward. "I thought you said put him down," she says, all innocent. "Give him to me now," I demand in a low growl. "Be a good little boy," she says. "Unlock your trapdoor, give me your money, then you can have the ranger back." I've warned her not to call Gus a ranger. It's not nice to make fun of people with red hair, or guinea pigs. "I'm going to the movies with Bella in 15 minutes and I need cash," she says, "so make it snappy." Gus swings in the breeze, his eyes pleading with me to follow her instructions very, very carefully. But I can't. Listening to Tanya is against my religion, and every hostage movie I've ever seen has taught me one thing: don't give in to the evil kidnapper's demands. Sweat trickles from my forehead and into my eye. I wipe it. I need time to think. I kneel down and peel back the edge of the rug in the middle of my bedroom floor. I roll it back to reveal my trapdoor. A small square hole in the floor, about a school ruler wide and long. It is secured with a flat gold padlock. I glare up at Tanya. I take one of the keys from the string around my neck. I open the padlock. She and Gus watch closely. I lift the lid. It stops Tanya from seeing what's inside, all my worldly possessions. 4.5 packets of Whiz Fizz, a small tub of premium quality homemade slime, a long cardboard pack of sparklers, a book of horror stories that Mum says I'm too young to read, 100 water bombs, a pre-licked giant lollipop in cling wrap, a small black cash box. The cash box has my birthday money in it. $50 from Nan, $50 from Mum, $80 from kids at my party, and some loose change. My entire fortune. I'm saving for a bike, so there's no way I'm giving Tanya $180. Think of everything I could do with that kind of bankroll. Gus only cost me $5 at the pet shop. I could buy another 36 guinea pigs for $180 and set up a guinea pig farm. I could milk them and start a new hipster craze for guinea pig milk. I could tell everyone that it's a superfood with mysterious healing qualities and they could extend their lives by putting it in their cappuccinos. I look over the lid into Gus's eyes and I know that my dreams of being a guinea pig milk billionaire can never be realised. I love Gus. I could buy every guinea pig in the world and I'd never find another one like him. He's smart, sensitive, loyal. He understands me in a way that only a guinea pig could. My fingers are getting mighty slippery, Tanya taunts. Gus is my friend. Well, that's embarrassing, she says. He's only half a step up from being a rat. She's talking about Ronaldo, my pet rat who's been missing for 2 months. I fear that Mum may have taken her for a long ride out into the bush, a rat napping. I bought Gus to heal the wound left by Ronaldo's sudden and mysterious disappearance. Gus, I tell her. His name is Gus. I figure that reminding her that he has a name might make her care more. Pass, did you say? She asks. Nice name. Suits him. I look back down into my trapdoor. I jingle some coins like I'm counting money. I have $1.60. I tell her, that's a lie. No, it's not. You can come have a look if you like. Tanya thinks about it for a moment. To look inside the trapdoor, she'll have to move away from the window, then I'll tackle her, grab Gus, and throw her out the window. Nice try, she says. You got tons of cash for your birthday. I spent it. On what? Stuff? What stuff? Lollies, I say. You bought $200 worth of lollies. It was only $180, I say. Oh, sorry, because $180 is a reasonable amount of money to spend on lollies. Give me the money now. I told you Gus doesn't want you to lie, Tommy, and my arm's getting real tired. Gus isn't even struggling now. He's just hanging there, swinging back and forth like a pendulum. He's given up hope. I'm the only one who can save him from the clutches of Tanya, the Death Eater of the guinea pig universe. Okay, you got me, I say. I have $5.35. I avoid round numbers, hoping that the randomness of $5.35 will trick her into thinking that's all I have. I mean, how could I come up with a number like that just off the top of my head? Sometimes I amaze myself. That's it, she screams. Okay, I say. Relax. Sheesh. Sensitive. 10 seconds, she says. 10, 9. So what do you think? What should we do? How is Tom going to save the guinea pig's life and also hang on to his $180? So I've been asking kids as I've gone around to schools what they would do and how we're going to save his life. And so I've incorporated a lot of those ideas into the rest of the story and thanked the kids in the schools at the back of the book. So hopefully people at home can come up with their own ideas or buy the book and find out what happens. Read the rest of the story.
Students speak.
I give this book 3 lives. The first live is for the humour in this book. It is so funny and enjoyable to read. The second live is for how hooked I got into this book. I kept wanting to know more about Tom and I finished the book in just 1 day. The last live is for the illustrations. Not many books I read now have pictures in them, but this one does. I love how even the small ones can help paint the picture in my head.
Thanks, Liv. If you'd like to win a copy of this book, head over to our Facebook page, share the link to this podcast, and tag Writers Read by LiTracey in your post.
Rebecca recommends.
Now, I have had the great fortune to see Tristan Bancks in action when he has spoken to schools, and I have heard him tell the stories behind some of his Tom Weekly stories. I then retell these stories when I talk about his books at schools. Now I get to do it on the podcast. Now, my absolute favourite story is from the first Tom Weekly book, and it's called The Scab. Now, I don't often tell you the entire story blow by blow, but this is a bit different, as it's just one of those stories in a collection, and it's not just as jaw-droppingly amazing if I don't tell you the whole thing and the story behind the story. So, Tom Weekly is just sitting on the floor of his classroom listening to a story when he rips the scab off the knee of his friend James. The friend screams and Tom is in trouble. The kind of trouble that means he has to have detention the next day. When the next day arrives, Tom wakes up and he fakes a stomachache so that he doesn't have to go to school. Tom's mum, being quite savvy when it comes to faking, says, "Fine, if you're sick, you can go to the doctor. If you're not sick, you go to school." The thought of detention is so horrifying that Tom goes along with the charade and he goes to the doctor. And after the doctor pokes and prods for a while, with Tom moaning and groaning in fake pain, the doctor determines that Tom needs his appendix removed. And he tells them to head straight to the hospital. On the car ride to the hospital, Tom explains to his mum that he's really sorry, but he's actually been faking and there's nothing wrong with him. His mum says it's okay to be worried, but it's a simple operation and not to worry. He tries to tell the doctor and nurse the same thing, but they too think he's just anxious. So Tom does get his appendix removed. Now here's the part that you don't get to read about in the book, but I will tell you. The story is actually true. Tristan Bancks, the author of the book, really did fake a stomachache to get out of detention, and he really did have his appendix removed. Now, I've told you one of my favourite Tom Weekly stories, but if you haven't had the pleasure of reading one of these gems, I'll paint a picture for you. Each of these books is a collection of short stories, but throughout each book there are also some other bits and pieces like funny lists and some very interesting would you rather questions. So here's a rundown of some of the other things and stuff that you will find in the books. So in My Life and Other Stuff I Made Up, as well as my favourite story, The Scab, there are some facts on Joey Jaws Chestnut, who is a world-famous competitive eater. He's a real person. I googled him. Here are some of his records. He ate 68 hot dogs in 10 minutes, 103 hamburgers in 8 minutes, 4.5 litres of milk in 41 seconds, 1.5 kilos of pork in 12 minutes. That's the same weight as 1.5 chihuahuas. 37 pieces of pizza in 10 minutes. Now, another one is in My Life and Other Stuff That Went Wrong. There's a story about Tom creating his own fun land, complete with a clothesline carousel and a jelly slip and slide. At the end of the story, Tristan asks the reader to think of their own backyard theme park. What rides would you offer? How much would you charge? What would the food be like? He then asks the readers to email him with their theme park ideas and drawings, so then he can put them on his blog. This is one way in which Tristan likes to connect with his readers, and I think that that's pretty cool. In My Life and Other Massive Mistakes, we have a section called Take Out Your Brain. Tom Weekly says, "I've decided to have my brain removed. I think it's for the best. I've made a list of the pros and cons and I'm going to take the plunge. Here are my top 10 reasons for having my brain removed and why you should think about losing yours too." I won't list them all, but here are a couple of his reasons. Mum's always saying, "Use your brain." But if I didn't have one, she probably wouldn't say it anymore. It would be kind of insensitive. I'll never have to wear a bike helmet again because there'll be nothing to protect. I will become the centre of attention at parties, doing a trick where I hold a candle to my left ear and I have someone blow in my right ear to put the candle out. And after the aforementioned scab story, this next edition would have to be my favourite, and they do appear in a number of the Tom Weekly books. But I love the Would You Rather pages in My Life and Other Weaponised Muffins. I often mention these when I'm doing book talks. And as well as being fun and sometimes quite revolting, I think there's a huge amount of scope to take these further in the classroom. So let's start with a revolting one. Would you rather drink a tablespoon of bright yellow pus or eat 13 fresh scabs? Funnily enough, most kids say scabs, but then there are the questions like, whose scabs are they and how big are the scabs? What about, would you rather get hit by lightning or never use technology again? I have had one session where all of the students said get hit by lightning and all of the teachers said never use technology again. And this one that brings up the most questions. Would you rather travel into the future or into the past? And you can't come back. So there are a couple for you to think about, and there are plenty of more in the book. So if you want books that are full of funny stories, some of which may be true, then please find a Tom Weekly book immediately. I should also add that these books don't need to be read in any particular order, just find one and start reading. The other Tristan Bancks book I will talk about is completely different from the Tom Weekly books. It is called Two Wolves. It was published in 2014. Now, lots of people will be familiar with Two Wolves, as it was shortlisted for the Children's Book Council of Australia Book of the Year in 2015. I often talk about how I judge books by their covers. Well, it was the quote on the back of the book that got me on this one. The title of the book comes from a quote. An old man tells his grandson that there is a battle raging inside him, inside all of us. A terrible battle between two wolves. One wolf is bad, pride, jealousy, greed. The other is good, kindness, hope, truth. The child asks, who will win? The grandfather answers, simply the one you feed. One of the things I really like about this book is how you get a feel about what the family is like from the very start of the book, just based on the description of the front yard. This is how their front yard is described. They walked quickly into the rain and up the cracked concrete path, past the 3 rusted, doorless cars that sat in the long grass of the Silvers' front yard. So we know straight away, without being told, that this family does not care about how the house looks, cracked path, grass not mowed, rusted cars in the yard. So when Ben and his sister are home after school one day, there's a knock on the door. It's the police. They're asking for their parents. And when Ben tells the officers that his parents are still at work, the police leave. Minutes later, Ben's parents arrive home, telling the kids to pack a bag. They're going on holiday. Now. It's probably unusual for most families to spontaneously decide to go on holiday, but more so in Ben's case, as they had never actually been on a holiday of any kind. No one will tell him where they're going, and he starts to wonder if it has something to do with the police visit. A few other odd things happen, like they have to go to their uncle's place to switch cars, and when they get to a motel, the kids have to get haircuts and get their hair dyed. Yes, it's weird, but Ben's never been on a holiday, so maybe that's what people do, borrow cars and get holiday haircuts. Again, I like how we get a feeling for the relationship between Ben and his dad throughout their interactions without it being spelled out. It's just the feeling you get as a reader, and you know that something is not quite right. So we can feel that the relationship between Ben and his dad is not great. So when Ben finds out why they are on the run, his loyalty and morality are put to the test. You see, it seems that the bank has accidentally deposited a large sum of money into Ben's parents' bank account. And I mean a large sum, like $7.2 million large. His parents, on realising the bank's mistake, have transferred the money to an offshore account. And they also took a large sum of money in cash. So they're actually not on some kind of weird holiday, they are on the run. This is where Ben is put to the test, because he has 2 choices of what he can do. He can do nothing, and the family will have to live in hiding forever. Yes, they will be rich, but he will never see any of his extended family again or any of his friends. They will always be looking over their shoulder. Or he can turn his parents in to the police. That decision will change his life too, but in very different ways. There's so much to like about this book. It's fast-paced, suspenseful, but also thought-provoking. It's the kind of book that leaves you wondering what you would do. And that's the reason that it has been a very popular choice as a class novel.
Hi, I'm Tristan Bancks, and you're listening to the Writers Read podcast.
One of the things I love about doing the Writers Read podcast is that I get to meet so many great authors like Tristan. You learn so much, not only about them as people, but what makes them tick as a reader. Tristan has a great sense of humour, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this chat. Welcome to Adelaide, Tristan, and thanks for meeting with us.
Thanks a lot. Nice to be here.
In this podcast, we're talking about your life as a reader, and I guess most of the talks you do around the place with children and at schools is about your writing life, but what we're going to chat about is your reading life and who you are as a reader. So when you think about reading and books, have they always been, in your earliest memories, have they always been a part of your life?
Definitely. Yeah, I think I was read too. My mum was a reader. My grandmother was a big reader. My sister was a reader. My stepfather was a reader. I had lots of sort of reading role models. And I also used to go to a kind of after school care thing, and across the road was the public library. So from the earliest age at 5 or 6, I'd sort of go over and you'd spend a lot of time in the library, and I'd read Where Did I Come From? When I was 5 years old, and go, whoa, what is this? And that blew my mind. Yeah. And then interestingly, when I was sort of 15 or 16, my mum left that book on the end of her bed, and I thought, we must have a little kid coming over or something like that, because I remember reading that when I was 5. Anyway, and I read Fungus the Bogeyman, and I read, it was a fun place where I had freedom too. I wasn't really supervised. You could go over there, you could just duck across the road, and you could spend time inside the library. And whenever I read Matilda, I always feel like that was me in a way too. I could just, you could do whatever you liked inside the library. They also had this carpet that if you did a skid on it, like in your sneakers, you built up static electricity in your body, and then you could touch the shelves and electrocute yourself, which was also fun. But yeah, look, I think I was never a worthy reader. I wasn't kind of told that you read in order to better yourself necessarily. I read because I loved stories and I enjoyed being inside those stories.
Brilliant. Not just the static electricity, but the...
No, that was a definite bonus.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So was there a book when you think about that time in your life that I guess you probably identify with always being a reader, but was there one book that sort of stood out or, really changed your life in some way as a reader?
Definitely, I loved Fungus the Bogeyman when I was a kid. And one of the short stories in the Tom Weekly series is about Tom having Fungus the Bogeyman overdue for 5 years from the public library, because I remember having books overdue for a number of years and being so scared that I just didn't go to the public library for ages because I was petrified of what they might do to me. So was there a particular book? I think Where the Wild Things Are when I was younger. I love those. I love the Richard Scarry books as well, where you'd spot things and spot the worm and all those sort of things. I loved Roald Dahl, as every kid does. I still have my copies of the Twits and BFG and various Roald Dahls from when I was a kid. Paul Jennings was probably the first Australian author that I remember really plugging into and thinking that he does what Roald Dahl does, in that he's not afraid to be dark, but he's also funny. I probably didn't think of it this way when I was a kid, but he really, I think that's what attracted me. It wasn't a kid's story. It was a bit sort of dangerous, Paul Jennings stuff. And I think I was attracted to that. I know, I used to read William books as well. Hardy Boys, I loved Hardy Boys too.
So it sounds like you had quite a diverse reading life in terms of genres and authors that you were drawn to.
Yeah, and I think those stories inspire me now. Like the Paul Jennings, my love of Paul Jennings made me think, well, what am I going to write short stories about? And starting to noodle around with things that had happened to me when I was a kid, and now 6 books in, I'm still writing short stories. And the Hardy Boys, I think the sort of crime mystery element, even though my books Two Wolves and The Fall are probably, I don't know, a bit more serious and a bit less schlocky or something than a lot of the Hardy Boys were, or that I remember them being. Certainly that crime mystery thread and having to solve, like a kid having to solve a problem for themselves was definitely, is influenced by that early reading.
Okay. So one thing that my students are fascinated to hear is that I don't love reading all kinds of books. There's some books or genres or authors that I gravitate towards more than others. So when you think about your reading life now as an adult, are you still reading as widely as you perhaps did when you were younger?
Yeah, I think so. I read pretty widely, and I'm always reading multiple books at once. In terms of adult books that I'm reading at the moment, I'm reading a book called They Cannot Take the Sky, which is about people in detention, so people from Iran and Afghanistan and various places in immigration detention in Australia. So I'm working on a book about a 12-year-old girl who escapes from an immigration detention facility. And so, I've been reading that. I'm also reading a book called On Java Ridge by Jock Sarong, but as an audio book. And then I'm also on the Kindle recently. I've been reading a book called Between Us by Claire Atkins. And that's a sort of YA novel, again, set in that world of detention. And I was sort of reading that to make sure I'm not writing the same book, because it was sort of, in that same world. And it's, it's much older and it's, different kind of story. So I'm always reading multiple things at once, which is sometimes annoying. I wish I could just focus on one book at once, but when I'm in a different mood, I want to pick up something else.
Yeah, and I think that's really valuable. for our listeners to hear, particularly our students who are building their reading life, and often find that they are dipping in between a range of books at any one time. And when I'm working with students and helping them to build their reading identity, I think that's one thing that it's important for them to know, that sometimes, depending on our mood, we might be reading one thing or something lighter or something that challenges us depending on how we feel. So part of your reading life involves you flipping between Kindle audiobook and paper books as well.
And I think when I'm stuck, the audiobook thing is really good. It's a way to unstick me. Recently I've picked up maybe 5 or 6 books in a row, and I read some of it and I put it down, and then I read a bit of another one and put it down, and then and I just couldn't find a book that. Sometimes I have the opposite, where I read 5 books in a row and I think every book in the world must be good, but just recently I haven't managed to find something that I really loved until the couple that I'm telling you about now. You go through periods. Sometimes non-fiction can get me out of that too. Like I can, when I read non-fiction, or if I read short stories, or if I can read funny stuff. I quite like novellas, like quite short books. I recently read Fearless Frederick by Felice Arena, follow-up to his The Boy and the Spy. And I really liked that. It was short, punchy, fast-paced, action-packed. And it's an imperfect science. Trying to find the next great book is a really tricky thing sometimes.
Absolutely. So what advice would you give to students who, go into a library or their local bookshop, and, there's that kind of shelf shock of, there's so many books, I don't know where to start. Have you got a tip that might help them?
I like shelf shock as a term. I know it is. It's overwhelming, isn't it? There are just so many books. I think probably reading all of my books is probably the best plan for them up front. And then once they've finished my books, no, I'm kidding. Look, I think being unafraid to put down something that you don't like is, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're a terrible, that you're terrible reader or that you don't like reading or whatever. It's just that you didn't particularly like that book. And if you find that in general you have no inspiration to pick up a book ever, I have 2 sons, one who's a voracious reader, has read thousands of books, and one who will never actively pick up a book himself, but he loves me reading to him. He loves audiobooks. He loves stories of all kinds, but just the actual process of reading doesn't appeal to him. But it doesn't, even if you don't like that process, it doesn't mean you have to miss out on books.
Absolutely. And I'd say my son's exactly the same, loves to be read to and would listen to audiobooks, but the actual process of kind of decoding the book himself and making sense of it seems to be really hard work. Yeah. So, but you're absolutely right. We can still enjoy stories and being read to in other ways. And
I actually don't differentiate myself the difference between listening to an audiobook and reading a book. For me, it feels like exactly the same process. I'm getting the same words. I'm taking it in a different way, but for me, I don't differentiate between the two.
So it's I guess
you're still imagining you're having to imagine a lot in your mind. It's not getting fed to you, but maybe in the same way that film or TV does. I don't know. I love audiobooks.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, students may view themselves as kind of less of a reader if they're going down that path. But what you're really saying is it's just another way of accessing great stories.
Which is why so many books are becoming audiobooks now. Yeah. I did the Two Wolves audiobook recently and read it myself, and I love the process of doing that. And my son, who hadn't read that book, he has listened to the audiobook and really enjoyed it. So
great. So in that process that you talk about, is there a place like a defined place where you would read, or is this something that, if you're listening to an audiobook, you could be out and about, or do you have a special spot that's just, for you when you read?
Not particularly, no. I do read before I go to sleep every night. Mm-hmm. So, but usually I'll fall asleep within 10 minutes kind of thing. Audiobooks I'll listen to in the car. I'll also listen to them on my phone. I'll just put headphones in if I've got to do, if I'm just around the house doing things as well, or if I'm walking somewhere. And on the plane on the way here, I listen to audiobook as well. I listen to there's Belinda Borrowbox app, and then also an app called RB Digital, which you can get audiobooks through your library, and so free for audiobooks, even better.
Great. So then in terms of your bedtime reading, this is one thing that my students love to brag about, that when mum or dad has said, lights out, and they're reading under the covers. What would be do you have a go-to bedtime book? Like, are you reading action adventure before you go to bed, or are you choosing something else to kind of help you wind down?
Yeah, it just depends what mood I'm in. If I'm loving a book that I'm reading at that time, I'll just, I'll definitely read that particular thing. If I'm sort of liking it, but I'm pretty open. Sometimes I'll actually listen to the audiobook as I go to sleep too.
Great.
So I'm pretty open. I'm always reading. I'm always looking for the next great book. I don't always find it, but I never give up looking for it. And it's a bit like my writing. I think I'm always writing. I write heaps of rubbish that'll never end up in a book, but I still show up the next day and I write more, and then I read it back and I go, well, that's pretty good, but this is terrible and that's terrible, but that's not too bad. So I think when I'm talking to kids about writing too, I'm like, when you write a story and you read it back and you think, this is the worst thing I've ever read, they're actually right on track to become authors, because that's exactly what we do every day. Yeah. Read what we wrote yesterday, realise it's terrible, and rewrite it.
Absolutely. And I think that's really great advice, that, we want students to read, and we want them to read widely and to, create really interesting reading lives for themselves. But I'm always encouraging students to be thinking about their now book and their next book, so that they're never stuck for what's to come next. And I'm always encouraging them to try something different and not give up. So you've had, one bad reading experience, let's try something else.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing your wisdom and advice to help our listeners and our particularly young students to get reading and enjoy their reading.
That's okay. I just realised in My Life and Other Failed Experiments, the new book, I actually have a list of 10 funny books. Maybe I could quickly share them with you, do you think?
Love to, absolutely.
Okay, here are my 10 funny books. There's actually 10 in another Tom Weekly book, but these are the new 10. The Giggler Treatment by Roddy Doyle. Roddy Doyle's very funny. The Twits, Roald Dahl. Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume, which I loved when I was a kid, and it's actually really funny now. And Super Fudge, I think, is particularly funny. Toad Rage by Morris Gleitzman. The Bad Beginning by Lemony Snicket in the series of Unfortunate Events books. The Stupendously Spectacular Spelling Bee by Deborah Bella. William by Richmal Crompton. Mr. Bam Buckle's Remarkables by Tim Harris. Marge in Charge by Isla Fisher. And The Bad Guys by Aaron Blaby. So there are a few in there that, kids would have heard of, and then some maybe that they haven't. So, yeah. Absolutely.
And I'll have to say it's one of the most popular sections of the library that I work in, that they straight to humour. And there's a few, as you mentioned there, that are quite popular, but some that will really help my students in particular to think about their next book. So yeah. Thanks for your time.
Cool. No problem. Okay. Thank you.
Tracey's tip.
I'm not sure about you, but I'm the kind of reader who has a multitude of books going at any one time. My study, my desk at work, and my bedside are all stacked with a wide variety of books all the time. Sometimes it seems the pile never gets smaller. In fact, it only ever increases in size. The to-be-read pile is the gift that keeps giving in my reading life. I'm not sure how this reading habit came to be. Perhaps I'm worried I'll run out of reading material. Perhaps it's the comfort of having the books right there, just when I need them. Or maybe, like Tristan, it's his mood that draws him towards a certain book. I know that for some people, having a stack of books that you are constantly dipping in and out of can sound stressful, confusing, and even unsatisfying, particularly if you are the kind of person who reads books methodically, a bit like having a to-do list that you satisfyingly tick off after each task is complete. I do find that having multiple books on the go does allow me to balance out my reading for pleasure as well as my required reading that I need to do for work. My stack also gives me the opportunity to switch between lighter reads and those that are fast-paced or emotive. One of the benefits of having a stack of books on the go is that if a book isn't grabbing me at that moment, I have another book right there ready to go. When I reflect on my own reading life, it always compels me to consider the kinds of reading practices I expect of my students. Do I allow them to have a stack of multiple books? Do I allow them to switch between genres, authors and series? Am I expecting them to read a book cover to cover before asking them to start the next book? English philosopher Francis Bacon said, "Some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested." That is, some books are to be read only in parts, others to be read but not curiously, and some few to be read wholly and with diligence and attention. This seems to sum up my reading life to a T. These reading practices would be the same for our students too. Part of our role in conferring with students as they read is to help them reflect on their reading choices and to help them notice patterns in their reading behaviours. If you notice that your students are readily switching between books in their stack, it's a great conversation starter. Find out why these students are connecting or disconnecting. Perhaps their book choices are reflective of those books that just need to be tasted or swallowed or chewed and digested. If we can name this reading behaviour for students, it can help them to be more metacognitive about their reading choices, rather than feeling like they can't finish what they started. Whether you're a systematic reader or a multitasking reader doesn't really matter. It's knowing what helps your reading life tick and what gets in the way of it that can make a difference to a reading life that will last. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Writers Read podcast. Remember, if you want to win a copy of Tristan's Tom Weekly book, My Life and Other Failed Experiments, head over to our Facebook page and like, share and tag us in your post. On the next episode, we hear from award-winning author Jack Heath.
Writers Read by LiTracey. Getting that book in children's hands. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram @Writers Read by LiTracey.